The bus sat under a bruised sky on a deserted stretch of road, its windows shattered, paint peeling, iron bones exposed. Inside, a woman sat cradling her daughter in her arms, silent tears tracing lines down her face. They had nothing left. No home, no savings, no support. And yet in that hollow shell of steel, they would build something no one expected. What they built inside that bus changed everything. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. How does a woman go from walking out of a courthouse with the papers of divorce in her hands to sleeping in the shell of a rusted bus with her only child? For Anna, the answer was not a single decision but a chain of moments that tore through her life like a storm she never saw coming. Once she had a home, a husband, and what most would call a normal life. But in just a matter of weeks, all of it was gone. The house she had poured her savings into, the marriage she thought would last forever, and the security that shielded her daughter from hunger all slipped away. The bus was never supposed to be their home, but it became the only roof left to them. And yet, what Anna and her daughter Grace created within its broken walls would leave an entire community stunned. Anna had once believed in the promise of forever. She married young with hope and conviction, and built her life around the man she thought would always protect her. She worked 2 jobs at different points in her life, often putting aside her own ambitions to make sure his career had the chance to flourish. When Grace was born, Anna poured every ounce of herself into creating a stable home, one filled with warmth, bedtime stories, and the kind of love she never received as a child. Yet beneath that picture of family happiness, cracks had already begun to form. Her husband grew distant, his attention wandering, his temper short. Anna ignored the signs, convincing herself that sacrifice was part of love, that things would get better if she just gave more of herself. What she didn't know was that her sacrifices would soon become the very reasons he walked away. Grace had always been Anna's anchor, even before the storms came. A bright-eyed girl with an unshakable spirit, she seemed to carry a lightness that softened the sharp edges of their struggles. Grace didn't know about unpaid bills, about late-night arguments whispered through walls, or about the way her father's smile faded with each passing year. She knew only the love her mother gave her, and the promise of safety she felt at home. The bond between them was unbreakable, a quiet understanding between mother and daughter that no matter what happened outside, inside their little world they had each other. That innocence, however, would be tested when the foundation of their world collapsed, leaving them clinging to one another in ways neither could have imagined. They had a modest home on the edge of town, nothing extravagant but filled with memories. A swing set in the backyard where Grace learned to pump her legs toward the sky. A small kitchen where Anna experimented with recipes that didn't always work, but filled the house with laughter. They had neighbors who waved at them on Sundays, and a church that recognized their family by name. But every photograph on the wall, every memory baked into the walls of that house would soon become painful reminders of what was lost. Anna had no way of knowing that the life she worked so hard to preserve was already crumbling beneath her feet. The betrayal that was coming would not only shatter her marriage but destroy the fragile stability she fought for. It began with missing money, late mortgage notices, and whispers Anna overheard in conversations she was never meant to hear. Her husband was not just withdrawing his love. He was draining their future, hiding debts, and making decisions that would leave her cornered. She confronted him, but instead of answers she was met with cold detachment and the devastating news that he wanted out of the marriage, out of the responsibilities, out of the life they had built together. Papers were signed in a sterile courtroom, words exchanged without emotion, and Anna walked out with nothing but Grace's small hand gripping hers. The house she thought she could cling to slipped away under the weight of foreclosure, and family who once promised support fell silent. And then, in a single night, it was all gone. The night of the eviction is one Anna would never forget. The sheriff's knock came sharp and unyielding, echoing through walls that had once sheltered her dreams. Grace stood barefoot in the living room, clutching her favorite doll, as strangers marched in to strip their home bare. Furniture was dragged across floors, clothes tossed into bags, and family photographs fell face down on the ground. Neighbors who once waved now peered from behind curtains, watching silently as the family they had known was dismantled piece by piece. Anna begged for time, pleaded for mercy, but the answer came in the form of locked doors and cold stares. By sunset, the house that once rang with laughter had been emptied, leaving Anna and Grace on the front steps with nowhere to go. Her ex-husband had already vanished from their lives. He offered no shelter, no words of comfort, not even acknowledgement of the devastation he had caused. Anna tried calling him that night, her voice trembling as she asked for help for Grace's sake, if not for hers. But the line went dead, and so did any hope that he might show a fragment of compassion. What hurt most was not just his betrayal, but the silence of those she once called family. Relatives who promised to stand by her chose instead to avoid her calls. Friends who once filled her home with laughter made excuses or disappeared altogether. In the space of days, Anna discovered that abandonment cuts deeper when it comes from those you trust most. With no money left and no roof over their heads, Anna and Grace wandered from one possibility to another. Shelters were full, apartments were out of reach, and the safety net she had always believed in seemed to have vanished overnight. It was during this desperate search that Anna stumbled upon the bus, rusted, forgotten, and parked in the back corner of a junkyard. Its windows were cracked, the smell of rust and decay heavy inside, and yet in that hollow space, there was at least a roof that kept the rain from soaking her daughter's small body. Anna told herself it was temporary, just until she could find something better. But deep inside, she knew this broken-down bus was about to become their only refuge. Humiliation settled on Anna like a weight she could not shake. The first night inside the bus, Grace curled up beside her, whispering questions Anna could not answer. "Will we go back home, Mom? When will Daddy come back?" Each word tore at her, but she forced herself to smile and promise that everything would be okay. Alone in the dark, with the sounds of the junkyard echoing outside, Anna wept silently, fearing what tomorrow would bring. She felt stripped of dignity, of stability, of every ounce of pride she had once carried. And yet, sitting in the wreckage of her life, Anna did not know that something was already shifting inside her, something she had not yet recognized. But inside that bus, something began to change. The early days inside the bus were marked by survival. Rainwater leaked through the roof, soaking the corners where Anna and Grace tried to sleep. With nothing but scraps of blankets, Anna spent nights pressing her back against her daughter to keep her warm. Each morning brought a new challenge, scavenging for food, searching dumpsters behind grocery stores, and piecing together meals from what others had thrown away. Shame lingered, but Anna's resolve hardened. She refused to let Grace see despair. Instead, she turned each hardship into a lesson in resourcefulness. "We'll make do," she whispered, even when her own stomach ached from hunger. It was during one of these long days of searching that Anna found discarded wooden planks by a construction site. To anyone else, they were trash. To Anna, they were possibility. She dragged them back to the junkyard and, with trembling hands, began sawing and hammering, fashioning crude shelves and makeshift furniture. Grace watched with wide eyes, amazed as her mother transformed broken scraps into something useful. Each small win breathed a spark of hope into their bleak surroundings. The bus, once a shell of rust, began to whisper a promise. Maybe this could be more than a place to hide. One evening, as they sat eating a meal pieced together from donated food, Grace broke the silence with a question that pierced Anna's heart. "Mom, can we make this our home?" Anna froze. For a moment, the weight of failure pressed down on her. This was never what she wanted for her daughter. But then she saw the hope in Grace's eyes, not the despair. And in that instant, Anna realized that home wasn't just walls and doors. Home was love, resilience, and the belief that they could create something beautiful from nothing. With tears streaming down her cheeks, she nodded. Yes, baby. We can. From that day forward, the bus was no longer a prison. It became a canvas. Anna stitched curtains from old fabric she found in thrift stores. She planted flowers in tin cans, placing them on the windowsill to bring life into their space. Together, she and Grace painted the walls with bright colors, turning shadows into warmth. The once abandoned bus began to look like something more, a sanctuary built by their own hands. Every nail hammered, every shelf secured carried the quiet message that they were not beaten. They were building. They were surviving. They were creating. Word of their determination began to spread. Passers-by noticed the transformation and whispers began to circulate in the community. How could a woman and her child, living in the shell of a bus, create something so full of life and hope? Some dropped off old tools or leftover paint. Others simply stopped to admire. For the first time since her world collapsed, Anna felt seen, not as a victim of circumstance, but as a woman who refused to surrender. But when the world saw what they built, everything changed. By the time months had passed, the bus no longer looked like the rusted shell that Anna and Grace first stepped into. What had once been broken windows and collapsing seats was now a small but vibrant home filled with love, creativity, and strength. Curtains stitched by Anna swayed gently with the breeze. Shelves stood sturdy with books and food supplies, and the little garden they planted outside grew green against the dull gray of the junkyard. What had once screamed of failure now radiated resilience. Locals who had first pitied them began to see the bus differently. Curious neighbors stopped by to marvel at what Anna and Grace had built with nothing but scraps and sheer determination. A passerby snapped photos of their colorful bus-turned home and shared them online. Within days, those images spread, reaching thousands of strangers who were stunned by the transformation. People from across the state, and eventually across the country, began sending messages of support. Some wrote that Anna's story gave them courage to face their own struggles. Others said that Grace's innocence reminded them of the purity of hope in the darkest places. What had begun as survival in secrecy was now turning into an inspiration for countless others. But not everyone reacted with admiration. One day, as Anna tended to her garden while Grace read inside, a familiar figure appeared at the edge of the junkyard. It was her ex-husband, Daniel. He had heard whispers of her story, had seen the photos online, and had come to see for himself. For a long moment, he stood frozen, staring at the bus that had once been a symbol of his cruelty. But what shocked him most wasn't the bus itself. It was Anna. No longer broken, no longer begging for help. She stood tall, her face weathered by hardship, but shining with strength. Daniel tried to step closer, his words clumsy, almost rehearsed. Anna, I didn't know. I never thought you could. I was wrong. He muttered promises, apologies, and even hinted at starting over. But Anna's eyes did not soften. She had already lived the pain of his abandonment, the humiliation of his indifference, and the nights where she had prayed for just a shred of help that never came. She looked at him and, for the first time, spoke without fear. You left us when we had nothing, and now we don't need you. Grace appeared in the doorway of the bus, her eyes fixed on her father. She did not run to him. She did not call his name. She stayed close to her mother, her trust rooted firmly in the woman who had carried them through despair. And at that moment, Daniel realized that the power he once held was gone forever. The woman he thought would crumble without him had built something greater than he could ever imagine. Not just a home, but a new life defined by strength and independence. That encounter was the emotional climax of Anna's journey. She had proven her self-worth not only to the world, but to herself. She was no longer defined by what she had lost, but by what she had created. The bus, once a symbol of ruin, had become a monument to resilience. Yet even as Anna closed the door on her past, she had no idea that the biggest shock was yet to come. The story of Anna and Grace did not end with Daniel's return. In many ways, that moment marked only the beginning of something much larger. The bus, once just their shelter of last resort, soon became more than a home. It became a movement. As the photos and stories spread online, donations began pouring in. Strangers mailed blankets, tools, and paint. Others sent money, not as charity, but as a way of honoring the resilience they saw in Anna and Grace. Inspired by their determination, families across the country began repurposing abandoned vehicles into safe, creative homes. What had once been a single act of survival ignited a wave of hope far beyond the junkyard. Grace, who had once fallen asleep on the cold floor of that bus, now stood proudly beside her mother, helping to lead a small community project. Together, they began working with others who had lost everything, showing them how to transform what little they had into something livable, something meaningful. The bond between mother and daughter grew even stronger, rooted in the trials they had overcome together. No longer defined by homelessness, Grace spoke with a clarity and confidence that belied her years, telling anyone who would listen, "This bus wasn't just where we lived. It's where we learned we could survive anything." The recognition came swiftly. Local news stations featured their story, capturing the vivid transformation of the rusted bus into a place filled with love and creativity. Soon after, the invitations arrived. Community events, nonprofit partnerships, even a feature in a documentary that highlighted stories of resilience. What once drew pity now commanded respect. People came not to mourn their misfortune, but to celebrate their triumph. And standing in front of the cameras, Anna did not speak as a victim of betrayal or failure. She spoke as a woman who had reclaimed her life, proving to herself and the world that strength is not measured by what you have, but by what you do when everything is stripped away. The final reveal was simple yet profound. The bus that had once been the symbol of their lowest moment was now a monument of hope. It sat painted bright, adorned with flowers and shelves of books, no longer hidden at the edge of a junkyard, but displayed proudly as an example of what resilience could look like. For Anna, it was never about fame or recognition. It was about showing Grace that they could take the worst hand life had dealt them and turn it into a story of transformation. From survival came strength, from strength came inspiration, and from inspiration came a legacy that no betrayal, no eviction, and no broken marriage could ever erase. They had lost everything. Their home, their comfort, their security, stripped away in a single night. But in the wreckage, Anna and Grace discovered something that no eviction notice, no betrayal, and no cold night in that rusted bus could ever take from them. They found resilience. They found hope. And most importantly, they found the unbreakable power of love between a mother and her daughter. What the world once saw as a symbol of ruin became a beacon of strength. For Anna, the journey was never about revenge on Daniel or pity from strangers. It was about showing Grace and herself that even in the darkest places, you can build light. And for Grace, it was about watching her mother turn despair into a future and realizing that they were never defined by what they lost, but by what they created together. And maybe that is the lesson for all of us. Sometimes the worst endings do not break us. They build us. They lay the foundations for the most beautiful beginnings. The rusted bus, once a shelter of shame, now stood as proof that from struggle can come strength, from pain can come purpose, and from loss can rise a story that inspires the world. Would you have had the strength to turn that rusted bus into a home the way Anna did for Grace? And what would you do if you lost everything overnight? If the walls you trusted to protect your family were suddenly gone, and the only shelter left was something the world had thrown away? These are the questions Anna's journey forces us to ask of ourselves. Because her story is not just about survival, it's about transformation, courage, and the belief that love can turn even the harshest places into a sanctuary. If this story moved you, give it a like, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe for more powerful true stories like this one. Anna and Grace's journey began in silence, on the edge of a forgotten highway, but it has become a voice of resilience heard around the world.